making great progress so far. Let's start displaying our menus now. Just like scripts and styles, we need to register our menu first before displaying it. Let's do that now. In the resources section of this lecture, I provide a link to the register nav menu function. Open that link and let's take a look at how to use it. As you can see, there's only two required parameters, which is the location and a short description. The location can be thought of as a special ID. If we scroll down further, you can see WordPress provides an example. In this example, WordPress uses an action hook called after setup theme. This hook is called when WordPress has initialized our theme and is ready for modifications by either plugins or our own theme. Let's go back to our functions file and use this action. So, right under our hooks section, let's call this hook, and the function we want to call is ju_setup_theme. Now, we need to create this function. Let's create a file called setup.php in the includes folder. The reason we aren't creating this file in the front folder is because some of the functions we'll be using here will be applied to both the front end and the back end. Let's include this file. Then let's call creator function. Alright, now we can register a menu. Let's call the register nav menu function and pass in a location and a description. I'm going to call this menu primary and give it a simple description of primary menu. Before I continue, I'm going to wrap my description in a function that doesn't really have a proper name, but it's called by typing 2 underscores. This function is a special function created by WordPress. It allows for text to be translated into various languages. We haven't gone over translations yet, but I'll give you a quick rundown. WordPress comes with various functions for translating strings. The 2 underscore function is just one of the most commonly used ones. When we start talking about translations, I'll show you the various functions available. For now, let's focus on this one function. This function has 2 parameters. The first parameter is the string you would like to translate. The second parameter is the text domain this translation is using. Earlier, we talked about text domains when we created our file header. The text domain is basically the name of your theme folder, in our case, Udemy. So what does the text domain actually do? Well, first of all, your theme won't be the only file that has translations. Users might have various plugins activated with their own translations. You can think of a text domain as an ID. If we pass in our text domain, WordPress will know we want to use a translation from our theme and not some other plugin loaded. After all, primary menu is a phrase that can be used throughout our site. Anyway, we actually haven't created a translation file and we won't be doing it so right now. If WordPress doesn't find a translation, then WordPress just won't translate the string and just return the original string. You don't have to translate every string, but I highly recommend it so your plugin can be used by the widest audience possible. Alright, that's it for now. If you didn't understand, that's fine. I'll be going more in depth in a future lecture. Now that we've registered our menu, let's display it. In the resources section of this lecture, I've included a link to the function called wp-nav-menu. Let's take a look at it. As you can see, WordPress has thoroughly documented this function. It's very powerful and flexible. We won't be going over every bit here since we don't need to use all the options available for us for our theme. Basically, what this function does is generate a menu for us and outputs it onto wherever we call it. So let's do that. Open up your index template and let's call this function in the nav tags. Specifically, you want to find our original static menu and delete it like so. Next, open up some PHP tags and call the function wp-nav-menu. This function can be called as is and WordPress will just use its default settings, but we don't want that. We have some things we would like to specify. This function only has one parameter, which is an array. So let's create an array, and then in this array, our first item will be theme location. This key's value should be the location name we used in the register nav menu function. The name of the menu we registered was called primary, so this key's value should be primary. Next, let's define the container. The container is simply a tag that is wrapped around our navigation's HTML. WordPress will generate the HTML for our menu. The HTML generated is simply UL and LI tags, or simply known as an unordered list. The container key simply asks if we want to wrap this unordered list with a div or nav tag. Depending on your needs, you can use either. However, our theme is using Bootstrap and we already have our navigation wrapped in a div tag, so we don't want either. So let's just pass in false. Therefore, WordPress won't wrap our unordered list with a div or nav tag. Lastly, because we're using Bootstrap, we want WordPress to add a few classes to our unordered list. So we have to use the menu_class key. This key's value is list of class names we want to add to our menu. If you have multiple classes, then you just separate them with spaces. In our case, we have two classes called nav and navbar-nav. These classes are specific to Bootstrap. Your navigation menu may differ if you build your theme with a different CSS framework, so don't think this parameter is actually required. That's it. Now, if we refresh our page, it won't work as expected. This is because we actually haven't created a menu yet. Let's do that now. In our WordPress dashboard, go to Appearance, Menus, and then Create a Menu. Take quick notice of the Menu Settings section. You'll see that there's a subsection called Theme Location. This lists all the theme locations we registered in our setup file. Let's assign this menu to the primary menu. I'm only going to have the About page assigned to this menu. If we save our menu, you'll notice our About menu item being generated properly. You can click this if you like and it will work, but it won't display the content. We'll fix that very soon. Before I end this lecture, I want you to take note of one thing. In the WordPress's menu page, you'll see WordPress outputted the phrase primary menu for our theme location. Earlier, I told you about translations and how they're performed. WordPress acknowledged that this phrase can be translated and tried to translate it. Since we don't have any translation set, WordPress then outputted the string as is. I just wanted you to notice that.